Hi everyone, welcome. We are so excited to have you joining us. I'm Jennifer Marshall, the Executive Director of This Is My Brave, and I'm here with my video intern Brooke Wivag, who's behind the camera helping out, and Brooke will be helping field your questions during the discussion. So thanks for joining us again. We are here at Greenbrook TMS in Tyson's Corner, McLean, Virginia. It's beautiful and sunny out, but we're here inside of one of our treatment rooms to show you what it's like. We're so grateful. The last time we were with Greenbrook TMS was at our Women's Summit in DC, where they joined us, and we were so grateful for their support. So today, I'm excited to be joined by Kelly Cefalu, who is the Regional Manager with Greenbrook TMS, and we are going to be sharing information about TMS therapy for depression. So.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much. We are so incredibly grateful to have this opportunity to show, people out there that are suffering, and you may be watching this video for a loved one, and we want to just show you that you are not alone. There are treatment options out there that are able to provide you some support and, the guidance that you need. So we're very grateful to you, Jennifer, very excited. We have treated over 2,500 patients here at Greenbrook with 80,000 treatments and counting. So we're very excited. Dr. William Sauvé is going to be here to, show you a demo of the device, answer all your questions, and we're just eternally grateful.
Awesome. And we're passing the microphone. We want to make sure we have best sound quality, so hope this is working well. Let us know, and I see some comments are popping in, so Brooke's going to be monitoring things for us. And I'm going to welcome in Dr. Sauvé, and we will get started. We have a script here, not script, but list of questions I want to be sure that we address. So Dr. Sauvé, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. This is pretty exciting.
So we are going to start off by going through what is TMS therapy exactly.
So TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation, and that sounds intimidating, but what the basic nuts and bolts of the treatment, we're taking advantage of a powerful electromagnetic field to directly stimulate the brain in a non-invasive way. Okay. So this is at its baseline a brain stimulation treatment, and what makes TMS special is that it can be done in the office, and it doesn't require, hospitalization, it doesn't require any kind of anesthesia, and it doesn't really, take away from people's lives, other than exactly when they're here in the office getting their treatment.
Mm-hmm. And you guys can see right behind Dr. Sauvé, or next to him, is the exact treatment chair and the device where folks would sit and receive the treatment. So we're going to get into that shortly, but let's talk now about what is TMS for, which you mentioned a little bit, and what can it treat?
So TMS was FDA indicated in 2008 for treatment-resistant depression. And that, for the perspective of everybody watching, modern TMS devices that, work like the one right here behind me they came to the commercial market in 1985 and have been sold in the research arena for years. But to use this treatment for therapy, that was FDA indicated in 2008 for depression. At that time, the FDA defined treatment-resistant depression as getting limited or minimal benefit from just one medication trial. So that's an important perspective to have, that really on the label for TMS, someone who is suffering a very first episode of depression in their life, an adult at this time who's had just one trial of medication for 6 to 8 weeks, which would be, a very appropriate first trial of an antidepressant, who didn't really get well from that, that would be on-label TMS treatment for depression at that point.
Okay, very good. And let's go into, I see we've got a lot of comments popping up, so thank you all so much for joining us. We're talking about TMS therapy for depression with Dr. Sauvé here from Greenbrook. So Dr. Sauvé, who is the typical patient that you would see here?
So typical patient is not the patient that was originally FDA indicated. I was just explaining that to somebody in the office. In 2008, with the FDA indication, like we were saying, it's one medication trial in a first episode of depression. When insurance companies started covering this treatment in 2011, 2012, I would say is when they first came on board. Medicare by the end of 2013, and now all the major players cover it. They all required 4 medication trials with at least 2 different classes of drugs. So 4 serotonin reuptake inhibitors in a row would not be adequate. It would be a couple of serotonin reuptake inhibitors, maybe an SNRI after that, and then at least one insurance company required 2 augmentation trials on top of that. So with that number of medication trials, really our population has been skewed, I would say, since 2012 to people who have suffered from depression 30 years, 2-3 decades without ever really getting into remission. That I'm forever asking people who come to us if they think their medications helped, and and they say, did they make you feel less bad? And they say yes. They didn't feel well, but they felt maybe less bad for years on medications, but never had a remission in 3 decades. And across the 2,500 people that we've treated, to whom Kelly was referring, the average number of medication trials we see is about 8. So 8, 9, 10 medication trials, people who have already undergone electroconvulsive therapy, some of them 20 years ago, and may or may not have done well with it, but didn't want to return to the anesthesia and go through all that again. And now what's most interesting is that we've been getting about 70% response rates across the board, and it's out of that population. So with people who've suffered from depression that long, been through that many medication trials, and we're seeing those people respond and get into remission, which is extremely gratifying, even though they're so far separated from what that FDA envisioned person was in 2008.
It's amazing. So I want to pause now and maybe see if have been any questions along the lines of what we've been discussing that we could address at this point.
So we have one question. Someone is asking if anxiety can be treated with TMS.
And you can imagine I get that question all the time. There's multiple answers to that question.
Because typically, let's be honest here, depression and anxiety tend to go hand in hand.
Go together like cookies and milk, yes, and you almost never see them apart. So that my argument is that, well, I didn't invent this argument, but depression usually presents either with depression, anxiety, right? Depression, anxiety, or equal parts depression and anxiety, but you very rarely see just one or the other. Study that I cannot name right now, but that I lectured on maybe about a year ago, suggested that even when anxiety is the chief complaint, you'll actually still get better results if you treat depression most aggressively first. So there's some suggestion that when depression is adequately addressed, more often than not, anxiety tends to get better and improve. So that's answer number one, that with the FDA indication in mind, it would not be honest for me to say that we treat anxiety with TMS, but to what degree that we can adequately treat depression, I think you'll see anxiety improving. Answer number two, there are certainly off-label ways to use TMS that are safe to do, and there's no reason not to do it. And with some treatment protocols that I'm happy to use, we'll see improvements in anxiety half the time. And I have a low threshold to do that because it's not dangerous.
Any other good ones that we can?
Yeah, someone wants to know about the cost without insurance, or if insurance does or does not cover it.
So Kelly's the best person to answer that question, or am I allowed to do that?
We'll allow you.
So thank you. All around the country, I would say average full retail that you would see for TMS is about $10,000 start to finish out the door. So that's the entire cost. And regionally, depending, I've seen more than that and I've seen less than that, but I would say that's about the average if someone was completely out of pocket.
But the exciting news is that most insurance companies do cover TMS, correct?
What, the insurance company? No, that's a simple answer. They all cover it. It's Medicare covers completely, and in fact does not require prior authorization. So the nice thing about Medicare coverage is that when we know that someone meets Medicare's criteria, we can just start. So we don't even have to go through a prior authorization process. Every other player, so Blue Cross Blue Shield, Anthem, TRICARE came on board last year, so TRICARE covers this, no problem. And very recently, the federal program for BCBS, they announced in December that they would start covering people who met the FDA criteria. So for the first time since 2012, we now can actually treat people who are potentially first episode of depression when they're quite young and have only had one medication trial. And if they're part of that federal program, they'll get full coverage, no problem. And I'm most excited about that. First of all, because someone can actually get into remission, before they've been ill potentially for years. I also think that that will probably improve long-term outcomes. If somebody can get into remission after having been depressed a year or less and only one medication trial, I suspect that years from now we'll find that there's far better functional outcomes down the road, being able to treat people early.
That's great. Can I borrow the microphone?
Yes.
So I want to encourage you all, if you're watching and have a loved one or family member or friend that is struggling with depression, to please share the video. It will be saved on our Facebook page as well, and we will receive we will be sending it to Greenbrook for them to be sharing as well. But Brooke has motioned she has a question. So
someone wants to know if there are any side effects.
And actually, that was our next topic that we were going to cover. So one more thing on the sharing. There should be a button that is fairly easy on our Brave page from this broadcast that you can share it to your page. You can share it to a group, and eventually when the full video has been uploaded, you can share that via private email if you'd prefer. But we'd love your help sharing and getting the word out, because TMS is a very effective treatment for depression, and we are now going to have Dr. Save talk about the potential side effects or risks and benefits of TMS therapy for depression.
All right, so thank you. And risks and benefits is probably the better way to approach it as opposed to side effects. So because people are forever asking about side effects, and the fun thing about this treatment is that we can actually say none. And the reason for that, all medication therapies, if you take a pill that's meant to do something good in your brain, but there's no way to stop that pill from going everywhere else in your body. So the side effects can be related to your liver and your kidneys, and this treatment doesn't do that. We're stimulating the brain, and it's basically staying right there. So there aren't really somatic effects, in the rest of the body. That said, there are risks. Number one risk associated with this treatment, a very, very tiny chance of seizure, and that's been when it was first FDA indicated in 2008, I think people suggested the incidence of seizure was 1 in 10,000, maybe less. Most recent estimates that we're coming up with at the Clinical TMS Society, just had our meeting in May, is probably less than 1 in 30,000 when we're combining now our real world experience and all the cases that we've done across all the different devices. So 1 in 30,000, probably even less than that. So in someone who doesn't have any other risk for seizure, it's really not something you would see very often. There's also no risk for seizure outside of when the treatment is going on. Okay. So it's perfectly permissible to drive a car after having this treatment. There's no official recovery time after a treatment.
No, like drowsiness or
typically no. Interestingly, maybe about a third of people that I treat will tell me sometimes that they feel a little wiped out after a treatment. I've never had anyone say they didn't think they could drive. It was more of a sensation of feeling the need to maybe rest for a little bit. And that I asked a guy once if he felt like he read a 1,000-page book in about an hour, and he said that's it exactly. So that we did make his brain fire 3,000 times in a brief period of time. So it's interesting to me that most people don't seem to experience that. But again, I've never had anyone that didn't think they could drive a car. They just walk out of here and say they feel like they need a little break afterwards. Other risks are metal. This magnet and the coil you can kind of see behind me is in a plastic housing. It generates a field that's on par with an MRI. right? So that's a 1.5, 2-ish Tesla electromagnetic field. So you have to be conscious of metal objects. Same reason you don't take a pocket knife into an MRI scan. Now, really, the official safe distance on this particular device is 30 centimeters. So 30 centimeters away from that coil, nothing is going to get affected. We have people in the office who play with their phone during a treatment. We've never busted a phone. So usually, and if people are wearing a watch or rings, those can all stay right where they are. Officially, by the book, earrings should come out. Truth is, I've never seen something in the ear actually get affected by the magnet, so we'll watch for those things. But it's very, very rare that someone has a piece of metal that's going to be A, dangerous, and B, can't be moved. Pacemakers are a contraindication. There's a huge caution associated with that, not only because of the metal, but because it's an active piece of electronics and you wouldn't want to disrupt its function. Right. So a small number of stuff like that. The only other official risk, we do say there's a risk of headache associated with the treatment. The treatment, when it's ongoing, it feels like something is tapping on your head, and that's the magnetic field is stimulating the muscles in your scalp and the nerves, right under the skin. So nothing's physically, tapping on your head, but that's the subjective experience. It feels that way, and after about 3,000 of those, you'd be surprised how uncommon it is for people to have a lingering headache, right where they felt the coil. Usually easily solved by over-the-counter, headache solution of choice, and it's really not common for me to have my patients tell me that they're having any kind of headache. So if it's happening, they don't necessarily think it's something they need to talk about. It's a complaint we hear fairly rarely. Migraines are not really something that's a risk associated with this treatment. If anything, there's a small amount of data that migraines improve. So people come to us, with depression and migraine headaches, and sometimes they find they actually get better as opposed to being worsened.
Very good. Okay, Brooke, we have another question.
How soon will a patient feel relief?
So average, usually by about 15 sessions in, we quite commonly see, improvement that, people getting the treatment can feel that things are starting to get better, and some of the little tests that we do, slightly more objective measures of depression, you can start seeing improvement on those scales.
Actually, step back for a second, because I don't know if we glossed over, but a treatment path would be
5 days a week.
5 days a week.
Typically between 20 and 30 sessions. And the basis for that is that when someone has achieved about the best benefit they're going to get from the treatment, the convention would be to plan on doing about 10 more treatments after that to consolidate your gains. So in someone who responded extremely robustly and extremely quickly and was hypothetically in remission by 10 treatments, it would be reasonable to go to 20 and maybe be done. Much more commonly, we're seeing responses, somewhere between treatment 15 and 20, and that would be a reason to go all the way to 30. And when insurance companies authorize this, they usually authorize 36, which is 5 days a week for about 6 weeks, 30 sessions, and then a small taper. Okay. So that's usually the course that we expect.
And with the taper, would it still be 5 days, or it'd be maybe 3 days a week? Or
tapers typically for insurance, the 36 rounds, it's usually going to be about a 3-2-1.
Okay, gotcha. And one other thought I had was, when you're going through the treatment, which you touched on a little bit, someone might be able to be, on their phone or whatnot. Do patients typically read books, or do they watch TV, or what do they do during because the session lasts how many minutes again? Now,
most commonly, sessions last about 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay.
That was a fairly recent thing with this device. It used to be 37.5 minutes was a standard treatment with 10 hertz pulses, 4 seconds on, 26 seconds off for 3,000 total pulses. That 26 seconds off it's more to keep the coil from getting too hot than it is, any other reason to have that break. So very recently, the company that makes this device, they got FDA approval to back that break all the way down to 11 seconds. If heat is not so much of an issue for a variety of reasons. So now 3,000 pulses in most of the people I treat actually takes about 19 minutes. So a 19-minute session, in answer to your other...
Do it over your lunch break. Right?
Well, and we do that quite commonly. If people happen to work close enough to the office, they come for treatment on their lunch hour and they return to work afterwards, and it's fine. And that I don't know what they choose to tell their colleagues they're doing every day, but but when they come to work, they're fine. So I mean, there's no reason why they would need to have an explanation for what they've been up to.
They want to be shouting from the rooftops after they start to feel that remission and relief. So Brooke did have a question come through.
Yes, we have two more questions.
Okay.
Someone wants to know, after a full course of treatment, is maintenance necessary? And if so, how frequently?
So maintenance is, to back up a little bit, most importantly, maintenance is not FDA approved for this treatment. And the most likely reason for that, statistically, it's extremely difficult to prove you're preventing something. So that, the pivotal studies to prove that this acute treatment is effective, those have been completed, and FDA approval was done in 2008. It'll take thousands of cases and years to prove that you're actually, bending the curve of recurrence of depression down by doing any kind of maintenance treatment. So it's off-label to do maintenance. Most TMS practitioners that I know we have maintenance protocols, and we believe in them a little bit more in a religious fashion, rather than a scientific one. In my practice, maintenance treatments are usually 1 to 2 sessions a month. I'll taper down, and I have a small handful of people who've been doing well for years on that. I also know of many practices that they tend to call it boosters instead of maintenance, and about once every 3 to 6 months, people will come for 5 treatments in a row, Monday through Friday, and do extremely well with that. Because that's not FDA approved, typically insurance will not authorize that. Sometimes they will, there's no reason not to ask, but a lot of times they won't. So that ends up frequently being an out-of-pocket thing. Most importantly, 1-year durability data was published in 2014 for this treatment. And after one successful round of TMS, 2/3 of people were still doing well at the end of a year. So after one successful round, I don't typically recommend maintenance because it will typically cost money for most people. I cannot prove they need it. 2/3 of people probably won't need any kind of maintenance. And I'm a doctor, not a con man. I don't really spend a lot of time trying to sell things I can't prove people need. After a second round, if someone does need to return to treatment, and that same study in the 1/3 of people who did have their depression re-escalate, vast majority of them responded extremely well to resumption of TMS. So if it works well once, it typically works well twice. If we retreat someone, then I'm maybe a little bit more interested in suggesting that we do some kind of maintenance, because if we've had to treat twice, I think then it's a safe bet that a third time is probably imminent, and I'd rather not have people, yo-yoing, and then we'll do that. But after one successful round, quite a few people are likely to stay well for long periods of time.
Well, I'm going to borrow the microphone. That is actually a good point that I want to bring up, the fact that Greenbrook TMS just recently released a video that we want to share. Brooke's going to be posting it in the comments, that shares some testimonials from their current and past patients who, have had success and want to share their journeys. So check out that video. It's a few minutes long, and we'll post that. And then I think we're going to go to doing a little bit of a demo of showing you the device and kind of visiting the basic mechanism of the device. So I'm going to pass this to you.
Well, fair warning, in the video, my beard is about 3 times this size. It's same guy, different beard.
Longer beard in the video. So, okay, so should we give it a go? I think we have a good angle on the device. So you want to explain to us what people are seeing?
Sure. So the device here.
Sit in the chair, or am I? How are we
You can sit, and I'll help.
sit?
Yeah, I'll help
I'm going to sit in the chair.
be his assistant.
Okay. Am I staying seated for now? How we'll do this?
It's a nice
So
relaxing chair.
So number one, this is now one of actually 4 commercially available devices in the United States. So this is a NeuroStar. The company that makes it is Neuronetics, and this was FDA approved in 2008. So this was the first commercially available TMS device in the United States that was on label. And then, some other devices that I suppose we can talk about next, but some other devices are now available.
We may not have time, but
or we won't have time.
Facebook Live, we might have time for that.
So this device, when you look at it, it looks like a dentist chair. Mm-hmm. That's because it is. and then the rest of the device is for treatment. The chair is really all about getting into position, and the headrest here is the way that your head is positioned, consistently every time, so that we can get the coil into the right place every time.
Very comfortable.
And it can recline back. I think it reclines to about 30 degrees. And then, once someone's head is all in position and made as comfortable as possible, the coil, moves around on a boom.
And we're not doing an actual treatment. We're just kind of giving you guys a view.
So the coil will be placed on the prefrontal cortex, and that's where the studies have shown that people that suffer from depression have underactivity in the prefrontal cortex. So that is the area that we would stimulate.
And for the whole treatment, the coil, sits there right against your head. It's on a clutch, mechanism, so it just gently sits there. It has 2 little touch sensors, so that if for any reason you happen to move out from under the coil, like if you had a big sneeze or something, it senses that it's no longer in position, and it would just automatically pause, and my staff would come in and fix it and just start the treatment up again.
And actually, so is a technician in the room with you the whole time then?
For this, in the room, or at least usually within about 10 feet. Okay. So our staff are always nearby and popping in and out and checking on everybody at all times.
TV up here.
And that's an answer to one of your earlier questions, that typically in our offices we have a TV bolted to the wall right in your field of view, so people don't get too bored. We'll give you the remote. I've had more than one person they read a book instead. That's sometimes a little awkward because your head is largely held still. Right. So you're stuck, but people do that.
Okay. And then Brooke, do we have any other questions?
Yes, someone wants to know how experienced Greenbrook TMS its doctors are with this kind of treatment.
Wow. So that I was trained to do TMS treatment by the Navy in 2010. And and then now for 3 years, it's been 5 years that we've been working together, and I've been able to do nothing but TMS, for my practice for about 3 years now as we continue to expand. Greenbrook TMS as a whole is the largest provider in the country. So all of us that work with TMS have probably more opportunity than any other doctor in the country. Oh, and response rates. So, and I alluded to that earlier, that out of the 2,500 people that we've treated at our company, we've had 70% getting at least about a 50% response. So feeling substantially improved. 45% of that entire population has gotten into remission.
That's wonderful. And Brooke has another question.
Is this a permanent solution?
In some people, it could be. That it's going to take quite a few years to prove that. But what we're seeing, the 1 year data is what's published. So 2/3 of people that are doing well for at least a year. That data only goes out 1 year. So there's no doubt that some of those people did well longer than that. But the data, only goes out 1 year for now. Because of the theory of how this treatment works, the theory is that we're not only increasing the activity in this left prefrontal cortex, but by doing it repeatedly, 3,000 pulses a day for, 30 sessions, we've really made that whole circuit fire about 90,000 times. And with the phenomenon of how the brain learns and long-term potentiation, it is highly likely that when this treatment succeeds, we've brought about a persistent change. And therefore, in some people, there's no compelling reason to think that will somehow be reversed. So, yes, I think it's highly possible that some people will stay well, potentially indefinitely.
That's great. And I think I'm going to do a quick check to see with the team whether we missed anything. Or
How does a person come to Greenbrook? What's the process?
Okay.
Oh,
So we're going to repeat the question. This last question we want to cover is about, well, I think one of the last questions, we're running short on time, but is how does a person learn more about Greenbrook TMS? And I believe on the website there's a way to sign up for a free consultation. So you'd meet with Dr. Sauvé or another one of the...
so for the free consultation, anybody who can contact us directly, or their therapist or their physician or, their practitioner can direct them to us. All those methods are just fine. And they'll all be offered a consultation with my staff, and there will be no charge for that.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is the visit by which anyone who's considering TMS can get the full basic education about what this all means. Also, my staff takes the opportunity to get any and all information we need to get an insurance ball rolling. At that point, if people still want to move forward with the treatment, they'll be scheduled for a visit with one of our doctors like me. So by the time people commit to a visit with a psychiatrist, I would say we're probably about 90% complete with the process of getting authorization and being able to make plans to start the treatment.
Okay, great. Brooke, did we have any other questions that we could
There
address?
is a question about people with other conditions. So someone who has Chiari malformation wants to know if it's safe for them.
It could be, depending on any kind of condition which might affect the brain. So people who someone who may have had a stroke, someone who may have a malformation, up to or including someone who may have had to have surgery or had an injury. So there might be a plate in their head. Those are all conditions that I would then want to consult with their other a neurologist, a neurosurgeon, and determine. Get into the weeds about whether or not we can proceed safely. So for conditions like that, I wouldn't say the answer is always going to be no, but it's going to be more investigation on my part, which we'll absolutely do.
Okay, well, I think we are going to work on wrapping up. We're short on time, but thank you all so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about TMS therapy for depression, please visit greenbrooktms.com and, shoot them a message that you want to learn more, come in for a free consultation. And we're hopefully going to be doing more of these Facebook Live events because we want to share with our audience and our fans and, those who are reaching out to This Is My Brave for information on other options. We want to tell you about what's out there, and TMS therapy for depression, we thought it was really important to get the message out. So thank you to Dr. Sauvé for being with us, and we hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon.